Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Do we have Margaret online there? Yes.
Yes, she is.
Okay. All right, I'm calling this Committee of the Whole meeting to order at 6 p.m. in council chambers. We have no remote electronic attendance, so we start with public comment. Is there public comment this evening?
Yes.
Yes, please come to the mic and tell us your name.
My name's Scott Sappington Jr. I live on 45th Street. I'm here because I'm opposed to the parking change on 45th Street. Somebody that has an enclosed trailer who's done racing and stuff like that. I have a narrow driveway, so when I back in, I cut through my yard to actually get into my driveway with a longer trailer. If there's parking moving my side of the street, now I might not be able to actually get into my driveway. And I was reading a lot of the other comments and stuff that were, and I called about this. They said the waste and snow, what's going to change by moving it to the other side of the street? And I mean, it's been this way for at least 17 years I know of. My next door neighbor, she's lived there longer than me. She said it's been that way since she's lived there. So I'm just curious what brought this all about. I mean, I understand they said snow, which last year I struggled to even get snowplows to come through. Half the time, me having a truck, other people with trucks would make pass. It turned nice. So is changing that actually gonna really solve the problem? And blocking driveways, mowing my yard, stuff like that. When I bought my house, I looked at houses on both sides of that street because I wanted to live in that neighborhood because I have friends in there. But I chose to buy one without parking on it, so for easeability of me. I have an artificial hip, so with a rider, if I got a car parked right on the street, am I gonna be able to get all the way up there and stuff, or am I still gonna have to get the push mower out, stuff like that? That's all I got.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for allowing me to speak on the subject. I also live at 45th Street, 2421 45th Street. I received your letter. I live down by what referred to in the letter as a U-shaped curve. I counted the cars when I left this morning. There were 2 cars parked in that street. That street's approximately 2 blocks long. The most cars I've seen parked in that street are 4. Moving the cars from one side of the street to the other side of the street seems to me, the no parking sign seems to be a waste of time, effort, and money. If you move the cars across the street, that's not going to help with snow and leaf removal for the ones that are parked there that I can see. You could, in fact, increase the amount of parking on the street because the people on the west side of the street may suddenly decide they want to park in that street. So the snow and leaf removal haven't been a problem in the past that I'm aware of. I'm not sure what instigated this whole situation. The U-shaped curve down there, I look out my window all the time and watch that. No one hardly ever parks in that area. There happened to be this week about 4 trucks parked down there in cars. That was because the house was doing some major renovations. That ended yesterday where they did the major part. There'll still be some contractors where they're working inside. But other than that, people don't park on that street. I have no idea, but I'm assuming it costs approximately $1,000 to move a sign. Just guessing. I just think it's a waste of time. It makes no effect on me whatsoever. I don't care personally. I'm just, as a person who lives down there, I don't have a strong opinion. I just, as a person who lived down there, want to put my input into some people who may not be aware of what our situation is. So I thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment tonight? Okay, hearing none, we move to questions on the agenda. Anyone? Then we move to agenda item number 1, Langman Construction, change order number 1 and final. Project number 1346, sanitary crossing under John Deere Road.
Move to approve.
Wait,
Second.
okay.
That's okay. I'm on board with that. There's
Okay.
really not much to add
Motion
there.
by Alderman O'Brien, seconded by Alderman Went. Discussion? Would you like to say anything?
Get the ball rolling.
No?
I'd like to say thank you.
Okay. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Number 2, parking prohibited, 52nd Street.
Yeah, before you tonight are actually, there's 3 parking prohibited changes that are being proposed by staff as initiated by staff. One on 52nd Street, of course, 14th, and the street that the 2 gentlemen referred to tonight, 45th Street. Based on conversations with Joe and with staff, the purpose for the change really has to do with more so with snow and ice control and snow removal than anything else. And I know Joe's here this evening if he wants to elaborate any further, but the staff recommendation was to relocate the parking from one side of the street to the other in order to allow for better movement of our equipment as it removes snow and or ice during the winter season.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, which I hope doesn't get a second, but I'll make a motion to put it on the floor so we can discuss it in case there is a second.
Is there a second? Hearing no second, where it evaporates.
Right, I'd still like to offer something, reference that
Please
item.
go ahead.
I would encourage staff to go back and take a look at this one in reference to maybe at the top of the loop or the U or whatever you want to call it, to reevaluate or take a look at that about putting up snow route signs of greater than 1 inch. You can't park there. If it is just a concern of the loop for snow removal, that might, I know enforcement of those is sketchy at best, but that might encourage at least some folks to get off that loop and then help Public Works. So while we're not going to switch the parking, I would encourage staff to take a look at that at the next engineering committee meeting. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Item number 3, parking prohibited 14th Street.
I will follow Mike's lead of the exact same thing and with hopefully the exact same outcome.
So motion by Alderman Went, is there a second? Hearing none, that item,
And as it pertains to this, if there was a number of instances in the survey that talked about a business and a couple of other issues that had popped up that like staff to look into. But same issue with snow route and ditto Mike Waldron.
number 4, parking prohibited 45th Street. Mr. O'Brien.
I would do the same for this item. I think it's, I mean, I've got several phone calls on this. I'm not sure why, you know, like any other street, we have snow route signs, no parking if it's, you know, gonna snow. And I would do the same on this item.
So that's a motion by Alderman O'Brien, is there a second? Hearing none, that does not pass. Number 5, is there an other this evening?
No, Madam Mayor.
Okay, we move to our work session. Take it away, staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. I thought that I would start out, oh, I'm so sorry.
And Carol, you want to move that microphone like right next to you so that it does get, so that way it does get recorded. I mean, more than anything else, it does need to record it.
I'd be for us investing in a headset for Carol.
Out there.
There you go.
She's a very soft-spoken person with a big stick.
That word changes.
Yeah, that did work.
You want to give one of those here to the mayor? Madam Mayor.
Somebody else gets one from
Ooh,
this
it's still
side.
warm.
Yeah, there's.
That's probably coming.
Thanks, I'm gonna remove this in the next 5 minutes.
I'm not a puffer.
I'm sorry. Oh, this is what we did.
We have
I mean, we just have to write magazine.
Yeah,
two
exactly.
copies in the finance department, and we ended up going upstairs into the fire department to help with the copying, because our copiers kept jamming away. I don't know if it's like slight humidity, but the paper would stick into it, so I apologize. It's not me, but I thought we could start by, the first page that you've got here are Janine's minutes from last Saturday's work session. And I thought what we could do is actually just follow the list right down the road, and then I can address any outstanding items that council had asked for. If that's okay. So the very first one, we were reviewing the Arpa and strategic plan. And if you look at the little green highlights, that's kind of where the notes are. So in the packet that you've gotten, it's on pages, it's handwritten, 1 through 3. And we did a slight update with Alderman Waldron's recommendation was to pull forward 36,000 Court from 2024 to 2022. And if you turn to page 2, you will see in the margins where we have the descriptions pulling those projects forward. For the infrastructure for street improvements, we're gonna use the $1 million, and then there's additional $5,000, so it's $880,000 plus $125,000 in storm water. So we have allocated those, in the updated numbers we're showing you tonight. Then in addition, we just made a notation, and I wanted to make sure that I did get this correct. We had talked about, going down the list there with flooding from Arpa to potentially look at the FAR instruments. And I don't know if the council had formally approved that to be so, but we wanted to make sure that we notated it if that was the case.
Yes, Mr. Wentz.
Yeah, I think we discussed that there was $1 million that had, but I don't think we took any formal action. So if that's staff's recommendation, bring it back and,
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, we can do
Yeah,
that.
I thought we asked staff to report. to
yeah.
us.
Okay, it does not change the numbers, so I wanted clarification on that, so we will come back with that.
For,
Yes, Mr. Wentz.
for the 36th Avenue Court,
Yes,
it says pulling out of fiscal year '22.
I think that was a typo when we made note. It is pulling it forward from 2024.
To 2022. Okay, all right,
2022.
just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And I also made the updated. And I've got a copy of the CIP, actual sheets as well. We'll look at that there in just a few minutes. The next section, and I'm actually gonna reserve, and we're gonna come back to this at the end. We have updated all of the fund equities for all 3 years, including 21 in the current amendments with all the changes that we had from Saturday. So I wanna take you through what all we did change, and then we'll circle back and we'll take a look at the fund equities. So the next section I'd like to talk about is reviewing, with the chart section of property taxes. And so if you turn to page 44 in the handout, we have updated the splits. Everybody's got that page. Well, I
Page
guess the first
44,
one is-
page 44.
Yeah, I guess the first one, actually, I did wanna tell you, we did receive from the county very preliminary appeals numbers. They are not the final ones, and he actually said, it's on 2 pages. We asked for the 10-year tentative assessments versus the actual final assessments, so you've got those in front of you for the last 10 years and the changes. And then we've also supplied the levy rate that the council had rendered on for each of those years in tax dollars. And then the appeals, there's kind of a rough list that the assessor gave us. And he did tell me the appeals are pretty much in here, but there are going to be some adjustments for new construction. They have a few new construction numbers in here, but not all of them. And Larry Wilson had said that they will not be final probably until close till January. So, but these are the best numbers we could get today. And if you turn to page number 45, which is a list of the appeals, currently there is a reduction of $8,660,000. But we do need to net out, there are 3 very significant tips that are asking for appealing their valuations. And the first one is the Moline Center, it's highlighted in yellow. And then South Park, again, for $3.3 million, as well as the Riverbend Commons for $984,000. So that equals an adjustment of $4.3 million with a net reduction to the rate setting EAV of 4.3. We need to take the tips out because it's not in the rate setting EAV. So this is really kind of for information. And then based on what we had discussed last Saturday was also to reallocate the $400,000 that we had taken as a general fund levy and put it into the parks levy for next year as a one-time payment on the debt service for the pool. And that's on page 46. And then the entire levy dollars right now are the same at $15,987,676. And then the next two pages is just showing that same split and a pie chart as well. So any discussion on that?
Mr. Ward?
Yeah, on page 44, like in 2017, rather than the appeals resulting in it going down, it went up. Was that the year that we closed out Autumn Trails TIF? Is that the reason that, because I believe that it's appeals, but then also that may have been affected uniquely because we closed out a TIF and it went back onto the tax rolls. Was that what happened
And
that year?
honestly, I'm so sorry because I haven't been here, I don't know, and
Okay.
I got these so late, that I didn't have the time to really review them.
Okay, I think that that's what happened that year. So I think it was
I have to look into that if I
an unusual,
get a
yeah.
chance to figure it out.
Okay.
Hey, any other questions on the levy rate? And the
Carol, you should
total?
also point out that predominantly the appeals this year are from commercial properties as opposed to residential, the bulk of them. And that probably relates to the economy, the economics, and the lack of revenue coming in, and they're looking for tax breaks because of where they find themselves.
It's going to be hard to argue that on the income approach.
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
just for a matter of record.
So the next item here, just to give you a quick update, it's on our new personnel. And it is on page 49, so just turn one page. And the council had asked to move forward the neighborhood improvement officer. So you can see highlighted in yellow. So then you see that page. 77,825,000. We did pull that forward and that is added to the general fund for 2022. And then it was a very good catch that we did overstate the new positions out in 24 for the field workers, and those have been reduced based on how we was removed. Otherwise, everything else has remained the same. Then another follow-up was, let's see, we're heading into the general fund now, so we'll just turn the page. We have a question on the public art, and we did get clarification from Alex, and I have enclosed her memo to us. Janine reached out to her, and then I followed up with a phone call. And Alex did say that, although we are allocating $150,000 this year, and they are applying for that grant with hopes to get it, so that would be $300,000. They will be looking for some type of funding year over year. And we do not have dollars allocated right now in 23 and 24. But as we head into those discussions, you know, between now and then, we can talk about it unless council's comfortable with dropping in a dollar amount now. But they'll be looking for some type of a funding. And then she said that there is the additional 1% she addresses, and it's either 1% up front for a new developer coming into town, or they can pay 80% of that 1% as cash to the city that would go into that new public arts fund. Any questions on that one?
No.
Okay, moving forward. The mayor, and I think some other aldermen possibly, had asked for, what would happen if we used $1 million of our 6.7 reserves to help pay the pool down? So we did a couple of scenarios, and I apologize, I think only one scenario got in your packet. And the one that's in there is keeping the number of years the same, 20 years. The principal and interest would go down about $55,000 annually, and the rates, he refreshed the rates, and the market has moved a little bit. So the interest rate now is at 2.6% instead of 2.46. The other scenario that I ran, and I do apologize, I can forward that to you if the council wants to proceed in that fashion, is to keep the principal and interest payment the same, which was around $445,000 annually, and it would shave off 3 years to be a 17-year bond. And it's kind of crazy, but the interest rates, because it's less than 20 years, actually is less. It's a 2.377 compared to the 2.46. So the interest rate, we've got additional interest savings potential, as well as reducing the years to 17-year bonds, and then we would pull $1 million out of the general fund reserves for a one-time.
Carol, I know you and I didn't, if I could, just ask a
Yes, please,
question.
Mr. Vega.
Thank you. I know we didn't have a chance today to talk, this has been this hectic, but listening to what you're saying about a lower interest rate, a shorter term bond at 17 versus even 15 years, and instead of 7.1, 6.1, did you have a chance to even talk about possibly a lower bond, a lower term to 15 years, and then an injection of cash from the reserve that would help offset the cost and only borrowing $6 million even, or even half?
Yep, and like I say, we did run it with $1 million coming into it. And
Right.
the council could choose to do $2 million. It shaves off, for every million, it's gonna shave off about 3 years. It's gonna, you know.
Right, I mean, the life of
Kind
a
of
pool
easy.
is, much longer than just 10 years or 15 years, obviously. At least
Yep.
these pools are usually 20-year investments, like most capital investments that we do.
And we were kind of looking to stay right around that 445,000 only, so that we would leave significant dollars in excess of $1 million that would still be available from future debt service dropping off to be used for other projects or for infrastructure projects if you wanted to bond or just to pay cash from home rule in our CIP fund. So we were trying to kind of work within that $455,000 range.
Mr. Warren?
But if you reduce the payment, I mean, that's more money that we could then spend on
Yes.
streets,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, if we left it at the 20 years,
Because that's what the fund was originally created for. Out of the home rule was 60% of it was supposed to go to CIP and for streets. I know that we use it for some debt service, but I just want us to be cognizant of that those are dollars that we're not spending on fixing
and we
our
are
roads.
heading into Moody's on next Thursday. The ordinance is set, so, you know, we can accept and reject any and all bids as well. And we can also change, it is up to $7.1 million. So we still have time to decide if it's 6.1 or whatnot, up till about 11:15, so it gives us another couple of weeks. But
Okay.
if we knew today that we most likely were thinking in terms of $1 million reduction out of reserves to add to this, it would be nice to be able to tell Moody's that we're leaning that way. So, something to think about.
So you need action tonight, probably.
I mean, if you were feeling like you were able to make that decision,
Sure.
I know Moody's would look favorably upon that. But if you need more time as well.
Okay.
Is there another
Okay.
question? Any recommendation from the financial advisor?
Well, just the fact that it's less rates, it still fits within our 445,000, it's like, why wouldn't you shorten it up?
That's
If
what I
you had-
thought.
If you
Right.
had $1 million
Yep.
in excess reserves that you didn't feel that you had another need for right now.
Mr. Warren?
Yeah, I mean, clearly getting under 20 and being able to reduce that rate is a good move if you're going to do this. But I urge this council that we've got tens of millions of dollars worth of things that we either have to do or need to do or have committed to do, and we need to have a conversation of those things globally before we start spending these, our bonding allotment and our reserves. We have to figure those things out. Otherwise, we are going to find ourselves in a pinch situation, and wishing that we would have actually had a conversation where we prioritize things. And so I guess I'd like to make a motion that at our next council meeting, we have a conversation, that we put it on the agenda, that we have a conversation about those lists of things that I had sent out in the memo, as well as any other big ticket items that the staff or any other council member knows is coming online, and we actually have a conversation about the priorities moving forward.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Wentz, seconded by Alderman Moyer. Discussion? Mr. Wentz?
Yeah, the reason I think we need to do this, I mean, it is a conversation. I mean, to move forward is irresponsible without having the conversations, and to duck this is putting your head in the sand of what is coming up and the issues that we actually need to make hard decisions on. That's, by being elected, you have to sometimes say no to things, and I think by doing this, we will have a better understanding of the things we have to do, the things that we want to do, and then we have to identify the things that are gonna have to wait because we just don't have the funds yet for them.
Any other comments, Mr. Schmidt?
So just on the scope of the discussion, you're asking for council priorities, staff priorities. I'm just trying to understand what the inputs are meant to be.
So, can I respond?
Yes, Mr. Wentz.
So I sent that memo out, and I don't think in any way, shape, or form that $38 million worth of things is everything we gotta make a decision on. But there's certainly all those things on there we don't have in our budget to spend in any particular year. $6 million for a new deck for the arsenal. The new park that we're gonna wind up putting on the riverfront. A lot of those things, we just don't have the funds in our budget to spend in any one particular year. So we're either gonna have to deplete reserves, or we're gonna have to bond for them. And if our pie of bonding is only $21 million, if we wanna keep within that, that spending amount, that clearly does not cover the $38 million of things coming up. And so I think as a council, we have to be responsible and have a conversation. And whatever the things are that come at the top of that thing, those are the things that we spend the $20 million in bonding on. Or the extra $6.7 million in reserve that we've got. But we clearly, between the bonding and the reserves, we don't have enough for everything. And so we need to prioritize those things. Input from staff, the numbers I had were either from staff or from Alex at Renew or whatever. But I think that gives us a good idea of what those things cost and where they're at. And all I'm asking for is, if whatever we put at the top, then yeah, let's use it. And then let's make a decision if we're gonna bond for those or use reserves or how we're going to finance it. But to then just, the first thing that comes before us, say yes without having the conversation of everything else, that's the part that's irresponsible.
Points.
It doesn't stop us from the following week or whatever going forward with whatever we want to do, or even that week going forward with whatever we want to do, but we will have actually had that discussion.
Yes, Mr. Schmidt.
Well, and I think that having a conversation makes sense. These are obviously conversations that need to be moving forward. Especially as we talk about, like you said, if we can reduce that rate. Now, I don't know that I want to put another $1 million into that because of other priorities, but I think not answering that question of that $1 million to me is more of an issue. You know, I think I feel very comfortable with the priorities set out, and the pool's been a big issue and been something I've heard a lot of feedback on, and the input sessions have been very positive. So I have no qualms whatsoever with that choice. And I understand not everyone feels that way, but I do agree that having that conversation, especially if it can impact our bonding, does make sense. So I'm with you.
I want to point out that it's one thing for the council to discuss their priorities, but you cannot discount what the community has already stated as their priorities, and we have those in the form of the 3 pillars. They want infrastructure, which I'm glad to see we have a huge amount of this budget moving forward in in that bucket. The economy and quality of place. So we know already that the community wants those things that better our quality of place. And I am interested in not only the council's priorities, but in our staff priorities and those people on the park board and other commissions that help tell us what the priorities are for the citizens. So whether you vote for this motion or not, I think you have to keep in mind that we have feedback from the community already, and that should help us. It doesn't negate the fact that there's, what did you say, 34 million? I can't remember from your memo.
38, and that was just the
34,
list I had.
38, right. It doesn't negate all those things, but some of those things are going to be future issues we have to deal with simply because, as the ULI people told us, we have to figure out that financing, but I'm not sure we can figure out financing all at once because many things change over the years that will transpire between now and when those things are done. So it can sometimes be dangerous to try to see every tiny detail, every last dollar amount, rather than use the guides that we've gotten from people and one at a time address what comes in front of us. Mr. Wentz.
Yeah, I guess I'd like to know with the park board, and to your point, I'm not against the pool thing, and I've said that from the beginning. I'm against voting for this until after we've had this discussion, because I don't think at the park board they made a value decision whether they want this pool versus the riverfront park versus the skate park or the pump track or the other things that would fall under the park purview. They didn't, I don't think that they had a conversation that says, I want this over that. I think it was presented to them and said, hey, do you guys want this? I'd say yes, yeah, of course, it's an improvement to an amenity, but where the hard questions come is when you have to prioritize and pick one thing over the other. And so that's my concern, is because at some point we're gonna bump up to that $20 million or that $25 million or whatever we're at, and then all of a sudden the next thing on the list we're not gonna have the funds for, and then we're gonna have to raise taxes or do something if it's something that we absolutely need to have. And that's why we need to have the conversation.
Mr. Walden.
Invariably, you can talk and talk and talk about a lot of issues. At no time, even if we sit down and talk about 38 million or 45 million projects, are we all going to do them all at once? We're never going to do them all at once. They're going to come to us like this has come to us. They're going to come to us in a trickle. You have to make an educated judgment about what you want to do, and you take them as they come. And I appreciate discussing and prioritizing. I'm usually in favor of that. But I agree with what the mayor said and what James said. I'm willing to talk about that million. Should we put that million in or not? And I'm probably inclined not, based on potentially 38 million somewhere else. So I'm probably inclined just to stick with the normal bonding of the 20 years and then vote for this. Thank you.
My concern of the coming as, and this, we've run into this before, but if you take them as they come, and I think I've used this analogy with Bob before, is right now we have a pie, a $21 million pie. And we have a party of all these things that we need to do. And basically what we're doing right now is the first person who comes to the party, we're giving them a third of the pie. Now we don't know how many other people are coming to the party, how many other people need a slice of this pie, because we haven't had that conversation. These are things that I completely agree with you. There will be other things that come in along. These things are imminent, like the $6 million for the deck of the Arsenal. We were told 2 years ago it had to be done in the next 5 years. This is imminent, and it's not on any of our CIP stuff. We haven't even had one conversation at all about it. This council has made a decision that we are going to do a park, a signature park, the best park in the Quad Cities on the riverfront. We haven't had a discussion about that since, and we know that if it's just going to be at the level that Schwiebert is, the analysis is from a couple of years ago that that's going to be about $4.7 million. I mean, we have a number of these things that are coming on that are very expensive projects that we're going to have, thank you very much, that we're going to have to spend on. And we just haven't had the conversation that says, this is more, because there are, if we should all be able to list, this is more important than that, and this is more important than that. And I've got no problem with whatever we come up with. I'll support 100%, as long as we've had that conversation of which things are more important than the others.
Mr. Weldon,
My last comment, I'll stick to two.
thank you. Yes, you're helping remind me of the rules.
We always have priorities come at us. We always have to have this vote. We voted for cameras. You know, we didn't sit down and prioritize the cameras around town. That came to us from the chief. We sat and made a decision about that. I realize it's not capital. I realize it's not bonding.
20 years.
But I'm using it as an example of things that will keep coming at you the entire time you sit here. There will always be something coming at you. And I just think this is a worthwhile project. It goes to the pillars that we've talked about. This is a legacy project. I agree it'll last 15 to 20 years, as the city administrator has said, and I think you should stick to your convictions. Thank you, Your Honor.
I'll have one point about the pool in the context of this conversation. I'm trying to stick with what the motion was that we're discussing. But there are problems there. This isn't just about doing something new because someone was asked, do you want to do it? It's about the fact that there are problems there that were studied in a pool study, and there was a recommendation that came out of that. So I just want to be clear about the motivations for this kind of quality of place improvement. It's not just because someone said, do you want it? It's because it's based on data that was derived. So in any case, we are back to, if there's no other comment or discussion, we are about to vote on a motion to have a prioritization discussion about items in Mr. Wendt's memo from last week. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
I think I need to do a roll call. I think I heard 3 nays. But
Alderman O'Brien,
Nay.
Waldron,
Nay.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Macias,
Nay.
Wendt,
Aye.
Timian,
Aye.
Moyer,
Aye.
5 ayes, 3 nays.
we'll add that to the agenda in some fashion for very soon. Next week, I believe it was in
Yep,
your
next week.
original,
Or next council meeting. Will we meet next week?
which is next week, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, November
That's
2nd.
the
We
second.
have a copy of that,
Okay.
the memo.
I never got a copy of the
Mr.
memo.
I can send it to you.
Timian,
Your Honor, with that in mind, I would love to know the numbers for, obviously, you looked at 1 million. I'm interested in 2, just to understand. Because if we're talking about either freeing up a debt service, this is an ability to lock in at a lower interest rate because they're not going to be lower a year from now. So if we could use some of our extra money, I'm forgetting the word now, to help lock in a lower rate for this project that we want, to possibly leverage that debt later on for some of these other projects. I'm just really interested in knowing what those options are, including a 15-year or 20-year, just be creative. I don't know. I'm interested in knowing what our best options are for 1 million, 2 million. I think that's for me personally, that's what I'm
Right.
the most
Mr. Macias.
beyond that now.
You mentioned that because it's under 20, it lowered the, okay, so if we just do 19 and 11 months, whatever the case may be, whatever the terms are to give us that favorable rate, I'm in favor of. And we still benefit from it, and it's just one less payment, I guess, or that's on there.
Yes, I'll have you do several
Okay.
different scenarios, and again, it's in the budget already at higher amounts, so we'll cover about it, and we can choose, maybe next week, then what level we'd like to set that at.
Mr. Wendt.
Yeah, and I think along with that, I mean, this gets into some three-dimensional chess a little bit, but while there's some debt that is expiring this coming year, and this is what, there's a few years down the road, there's some more, and then a few years down the road, there's more. And so I think having that understanding on which years those clip in, and as we go through these projects, like we're talking about the Arsenal Bridge deck, you know, asking Joe, like, how far out can we go? I know it said 5 years, 2 years ago, but is that still where we're at? I know chunks of concrete are falling from the thing, so my guess is it's probably sooner than later. But those are the things that I think will come into play on making those determinations on what you add and what you might pull those, that term of years may want to be brought in.
To your point, Mr. Waldron, about keeping CIP and infrastructure as a focal point, and I've mentioned, I think on Saturday, the amount of deferred maintenance we do have in many areas. I'm curious to see if we get that infrastructure bill, which could potentially help balance this choice with that goal. So
It'd be nice.
we'll see. Well, I mean,
Into that.
I don't know when it'll
So
happen.
you're suggesting that we might get federal dollars for a bridge that goes to the Rock Island Arsenal? Which is
I'm not saying that one specifically, I'm just
That
saying,
would be
you know,
where you'd want to spend it, I'd hope.
As a council, we had asked staff to work with the Arsenal to get just that. And
right, no go.
we're still waiting.
Still.
okay, turning it up, Mr. Schmidt.
So I guess I was originally thinking as we worked through this, of coming back on a couple things after, is that more appropriate? Or if there's something that we've already been hitting on, should we just jump right in at that time?
You can jump
Does it
in.
matter?
Yeah, I think we jump right in.
Yeah.
All right, well then I'm gonna make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to adjust the set levy rate, or the levy dollars to an amount of $15,953,841.90, and I have this in writing for you.
Thank you.
Which results in an increase in the levy of $147,522.90 over last year, and uses the rate that was proposed last year prior to the adjustments that came on. So that rate of 2.01343.
Is there a second? Mr. Moore.
I'll second.
So, discussion, Mr. Schmidt.
So, obviously we talked a lot about this on Saturday, and I think there are two pieces of this puzzle that obviously I was struggling with then, and I'm hoping to find a little bit of that common ground where the way that appeals impact and raise that number, I do understand that we want to mitigate that. And that's why I think we should go back to using the same percentage we used to calculate last year, and as that same percentage calculation this year. Now, it won't come out to the exact same thing, but I think that is one of the best things we can do without cutting back every year. Because that's one of my big fears, is that if we just cut that percentage every year and keep cutting and cutting, we're not giving ourselves the money we need to grow. And we're not giving ourselves the money we need to pay for new employees. And so I am committed to putting us in a position where I think this goes to a way that is not raising taxes, but is also not lowering taxes. It is, I think, the best I can do at getting us to staying the same. And I think by using that proposed rate instead of the adjusted rate makes that balance.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Went?
So this is better than where we were at while we're still sitting on $6.7 million of excess reserves. So I'm going to support it. I'm not going to support it when it eventually comes to pass, but I'll support whatever reduction we can. And to your point about what the target was from the previous year, part of that was we were slowly trying to work it down to what it had been historically, which was under 2. And we were in a situation because of the pandemic, because of unknown issues with other revenue sources, to take a big chunk and drop as much as down to under 2 that year, it just wasn't workable within our budget. We are now flush with we're flush with cash. I mean, we not only have our reserve, but we have an extra, again, $6.7 million. Plus, we, by our finance director, even our projections for our other revenues have been put as very conservative, actually pulling back from what we're expecting this year. And so I'll support this, but it's still a tax increase. It's not as much of a tax increase, and the rate is gonna wind up going up, but I'll support this because it's better than what it was.
Mr. Schmidt.
It's not a tax increase. And that's just, at this point, to come here and to say that's a tax increase over, when we're using that same proposal is surprising. I think that we have that money, but as you just pointed out, we also have a large amount of projects we need to do. And we have services that are expected, and that is something I think we need to commit ourselves to. And I'm all for figuring out how to use that money appropriately, and which is why I'm not wanting to cut any further back, but rather to keep it the same as it was in last year's proposal.
As I said on Saturday, there's no way we're gonna sit on money. That is not what the community expects. So to continue to characterize that as we're flush with cash when we've just talked about how we have to pay for all these things, as I think is a mischaracterization. So I think we just need to understand that this council is committed to providing services, and we're not gonna sit on that money, but this is a good way to stabilize without going overboard. Mr. Went.
Carol, real quick question. The budget that is presented to us at the end of next year, isn't the expectation that we will have $17 million in reserves? Which is about $6.7 million over, and that's the budget we are, so if we want to spend this money and not sit on it, let's have that conversation. And maybe that's what we're having next week when we talk about the priorities. But until we are actually putting it into our budget to spend, we're sitting on it. Because that's what we've adopted, that's what we talked about on Saturday, and that's where my concern is that we haven't had the conversation of the priorities. Hopefully when we do, we will spend or reserve it for things that we are going to spend shortly. But that's not the budget that this group has already moved forward with. I know we're still in our second work session, but I want to make sure that everybody knows, it's not that we've got this over $6.7 million today. It's after another year, we're going to be sitting on all that money. So, and that's with conservative revenue projections.
And one other revenue and expenditure issue I would like us to not ignore is inflation. The cost of the projects that we have in this budget already is probably gonna go up. So, I mean, this flexibility that this budget gives us, which is only 147, what was it, 147?
Yes.
Something in growth. Just preserving some flexibility and then finding ways to deliver services to the taxpayer who put us in that situation is the way that I support going. But we cannot forget what inflation could potentially do to us. Yes, Mr. Timmy.
I appreciate the softball, Your Honor. With inflation is something I'd like to briefly touch on. The last time we were under $2 was 2012, and we pulled in, the tax levy was $14,684,000. Now, it did stay consistent for 4 years, so that's because property value was going down at the time, so I think that was a wise choice. That $15,684,000 in today's money is $17.5 million, which means despite how much we argue about this, we are pulling in less money than we were when the rate was $1.99 today. We are trying to run the same city with more people on less money. And if that trend continues, we will continue to have fewer resources, fewer employees staying around. There's a lot of deferred maintenance that are going to continue to be deferred. And I think that it is an important factor to consider when we talk about money and inflation and rates and everything like that. Costs go up, inflation is a factor. As a result, we can't stay baseline or continue to drop. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Went.
Yeah, well, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, inflation has gone up, but that's where we capture those things in our other revenue sources, is sales tax, because it's a percentage of what things cost and those sorts of things. The comment that we're doing this for more people. We're not. We're shrinking. The number of people in the city of Moline is shrinking. And a big reason, because I deal with it every single day, is people not buying homes in the Illinois side and in Moline because the tax rate is so much higher than across the river. They look online and they see, what is my payment going to be and what are the taxes? And they see the taxes here being 60% higher than across the river. And that says, when I fly into Moline Airport, they come to our city and then they drive through it and leave to go to the other side of the river because our property taxes are so much higher than over there. You look at the sheet that Carol gave us. We keep comparing ourselves to Rock Island and East Moline, which are having serious issues, and say, oh, well, we're better than them, but we're worse than Normal, we're worse than Quincy, we're worse than other comparable cities in the state by quite a bit, because they're at like 1.5. And so if we were at 1.5 or somewhere close to there, we may then be competing against the other side of the river, where we are losing population year after year, and this is a big reason. And for this little difference of $40,000 or $140,000 when we're sitting on 6.7 million over our reserves is insane. And so I hear what you're saying about inflation, but there is the reality that this costs us residents every single year, that our taxes are too high.
Mr. Timian.
Carol, can we use reserves for recurring expenses like employee costs and those kinds of, like what is the preference and what is the recommendation in terms of how to use those money?
I mean, you could if you were in one time, like a COVID pandemic. But I would never recommend on an ongoing basis to just pull down reserves. You should look at it more that if you've got reserves that are over the level that you need, it should be one-time projects pulled down. Because you always want your revenue and expenditures to pretty much balance themselves out. Because otherwise it would be a constant drain around a downhill spiral.
Thank you.
Mr. Watt.
Carol, next year when the TIF comes off, if we were at 1.99, wouldn't we bring in an extra, somewhere around $500,000 extra in
Yes.
levy?
Mhm.
And so when we talk about a one-time, let's get us over this hump till next year, this would be one of those kind of representations of, hey, here's how we can do it. We've got the reserves, and then the ongoing costs could be covered by the increase in the levy that would be able to sustain a lower rate because of all the additional EAV that is added to when TIF 1 retires.
One thing that I might say in regards to that, Mike, is having prepared down a 3-year budget, we have already incorporated that 500,000 into 23. And it's largely paying for some of the positions that Bob was recommending for new hires are only partial year hires. And then with cost of living raises with contracts with our unions, it's built in right now in our revenues and expenditures for 23.
Mr. Watt.
How, can you help me understand, because you also recommended that we use a portion of that increase for the TIF 7, right?
For the two, what I was saying is that ongoing, say if you were going to eliminate the 181,000, which had been potentially a recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
What Bob and I had talked about, instead of considering that, if you're not wanting to put it towards operations, would be to consider allocating that dedicated revenue stream to TIF 7 and allowing that to compound over time.
Right, but you
Yes.
just said that it was already spent in the future years, so how could we also use it for that and also it already be spent in the future years?
Which amounts are you talking about? The 181 or the 525? The
Well, I think-
525 I was not including in TIF 7 when Bob and I talked.
So, but you said in the future, it wasn't 181 every year, because eventually it got up to like $500,000 a year.
Cause it's compounded. Say if you took it was just an example, it was one option. If you were to take the 180,000 this year, and next year, if we had the same type of growth, you'd still have that 180, and you take the next 180, so now it's 360, and then it continues to compound up until you hit the 800. Then if you left it there, it would very rapidly pay that tip off
Okay.
prior to 2025.
That's the thought process behind the stabilize, don't change it over
Yes,
the
yes.
coming 3 years. Got it. Okay.
It's just for an option for consideration.
Okay, so the
Okay.
motion on the table is, can you please reread it?
Yes. Motion to adopt levy dollars of $15,953,841.90. Well, that's the motion.
Yeah, to amend it from the higher.
Yes,
Yeah.
motion to amend the previous amount.
Any further discussion?
You have a second?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yes, we had
Sorry.
it.
Sorry.
Okay, all right. All right, hearing no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yay.
All right, motion passes. I believe that was 7 ayes, 1 nay. Okay,
Thank you.
we'll turn it back over to you. I believe we're on the second page of your notes.
Yes, I'm gonna kind of go through these rapidly, so stop me if you have questions. I'm gonna talk a little bit more. We did run numbers if we were to reverse the RANs on water and WPC that were made to help pay tip number 7. I'm gonna show you those on the next couple pages down, just what the impact would be on the general fund and everything else. It is an option.
What page are we on?
I'm still on the general fund, halfway down here in the green. I'm not leading you into that option yet, I'm just saying that it's coming.
Okay.
But I had it as a bullet point because it does affect the general fund. But I'm gonna show you the printout when we get to the tips. The council also discussed moving money over from the general fund to facilities to pay for the mausoleum's roof repair. We did get a bid, we had talked about having it be $160,000, it came in at $163, and they're still trying to get more bids, but we actually put it in at that number because we know at that number we at least can cover it. So I included that amount. And then we also have set up the $30,000 for the dredging, and Margaret is putting together a loan payment that will come before council, and we'll get signatures and get that taken care of with the captain's station. We talked about the pool for the debt service, and then the next item here is capital projects. And if you look at the green items down below, if you turn to pages 61 to start out with, the very first item, it's going to be long pages, I'm sorry, and I apologize, on Saturday, we felt that there was a project that had been missed, and as it ended up, it's because there was a typo. It showed 18th Street instead of 8th Street. So you'll see that in highlighted in yellow. 8th Avenue, 36th Street, the 335,000. It was there. If you look on your old sheet, it's under 18th Street. So it's just a typo. It's all included. And then just to highlight too, that we have pulled out the Glenwood Drive, that there's a moratorium on private drives until staff comes back for council's consideration on the policy.
Mr. Waldron.
Thank you.
This question really is for Joe. Joe, I see that 8th Avenue, 36th Street is under MFT funds. We didn't have much luck getting our MFT funds approved this year in a timely fashion, 34th Avenue, 26th Avenue. Are you feeling optimistic about these for next year?
Yeah, these projects have already been started for design. They're probably a month into it. Submittals should be going to the state before the end of the year to get us, to get us those approvals in time to complete these jobs.
Thank you.
Continue, please.
The next page then, we turn on page 62, the big handout. This is a project that has been recommended again to move forward from 2024 into 22 to use the ARP funds And I just wanted to show you here that, we are adjusting the printout, we're removing that off of this printout, and it's gonna be under the ARP funding. So, you'll see that in the future, and it's gonna be moved off of the CIP numbers.
Mr. Hunt, yep. go ahead.
Can we clear off the stuff that isn't done? I mean, or that is done in previous years? I mean, you still have 26th on this one, you still have 45th with nothing across, but I think
I agree.
it just gets too easy to get lost when you got a dozen projects and only we're doing 5 of them.
I agree. And when we go to put it together to find it in our actual budget book, we'll make sure that those
Okay.
are.
And are we gonna identify the things that move from one year to the next as well? I hope.
The carryover
We do have,
project.
and in fact, it's your very next sheet. And again, this is a snapshot. Joe and his crew were working on this today, but of course, until you actually get to the end of the year, you don't know precisely where things are going to fall. And as we go down here by type on the CIP, and Joe's also got it on the next page, the printout. It's the changes on how we came up with those variances by project, some things have come under, things have come over. But for 21 in CIP, you can see we project potentially a carryover of 259,000. For MFT, about 410, Joe can certainly speak to this. In water and WPC, we actually need to amend this December amendments because it looks like a couple things are gonna come in a little higher than what we had originally projected for December 31st. And then stormwater is about 110,000 over. So if you look through the projects, you'd have to ask Joe for the detail.
Yeah, but this doesn't include 26th or 34th, right?
26 was taken out and moved to 22. 34th is still in here because we will bring that forward as a contract this year still. The money won't be spent until next year, so that'll be one that we have to identify in a final budget book as spent in 22 but contracted in 21.
Well, and I understand that. My concern, and I think a few of our concerns are, and this is before you were in the position, so it's nothing against you, but that we have got a history of budgeting things and then 10 to 15, 20% of it doesn't get built that year and it moves into the next year. So we feel like we budgeted $15 million worth of work and, you know, only $12 million of it gets done or $13 million. And then, so then the next year is like, oh, well, we're doing 15 million again this year. Well, yeah, but 1.5 of it was from the year before. And I mean, we had a 5-year period where there was about $10 million worth of stuff that didn't get done in the year that it was done. And we've all heard that infrastructure is super important. And so I think we need a way to track that if we've budgeted for something and it gets moved to the next year, that next year should be 15 plus that $1.5 million. And I think that's maybe where we're at, because I think we're about 17, but we've also got these ARP funds, so I just think that there needs to be a good way to track this, because otherwise, I mean, I didn't realize that for 2 or 3 years when I was on council, and then finally I asked about it, and then I got a list of all these things that had gotten pushed every year.
Yes, I understand, and the CIP is like every other budget. It's a document that ebbs and flows as we get through it, and we'll work with Carol and we'll identify those projects.
Mr. Wallman.
Joe, I discussed this with Alderman Went earlier. I'm a little bit concerned. First of all, I'm all in on the complete streets. I think they look great. But I've noticed that we're not increasing our pavement marking budget. Pretty much stays flat at $250 for the entire 3 years. With all the extra painting we are doing, do you feel as if that's going to be enough to get us through?
This year it was enough. We did do some striping through the complete streets portion of our budget, so some of that was allotted and spent through that line item. So we did additional than the 250 or 275 that we had. But yeah, this year was plenty, and it worked.
And my concern is that typically, I don't know what we're doing anymore, but typically we did 1 year of long lines, and the next year we did crosswalks, and we didn't do them all at the same time. But with the complete streets thing, it is important to do those long lines for the bike routes and everything, and they will get some tarnish, so to speak, during the winter from plowing. So I just wanna make you, keep your finger on the pulse of pavement markings, all
Sure.
I'm trying to suggest.
Sure, and you're right, we will add those long lines on the gutter line where maybe we had nothing before, so, we'll keep our tabs on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Moore?
Thank you. Just, curious, where do we see the line item for how, we're gonna go measure the quality of our roads?
That's the 21 project that we're gonna bring forward still this year. We have some vendors that we're still getting some quotes back and gonna make a recommendation this year yet to enter into that contract. It was amended in our last budget, CIP amendment back in August, I believe, but it's
gonna
in
be-
21's CIP budget.
Sure, is it gonna be annual?
No, the actual picture taking of the roadway, they recommend as a average, industry average, 3 to 5 years, depending on how we update our numbers in between projects. But the ongoing software costs are very minimal, but if we decide to go with a software program versus a detailed Excel spreadsheet that's provided to us, then we can bring that forward and talk about those expenses.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item?
Next one, it was requested to show some history, and, we did some history on the CIP and capital equipment for 6 major funds that include CIP, the MFT, water, WPC, storm, and Arpa. There's additional projects added this year for Arpa, and then you can kind of see where the dollars have laid. And, yes, for 22, when you have the high stack of the very top bar in ARPA, that makes that exceptionally high. We do have some WPC, it's that $3 million, I think it's actually $4 million total of equipment for WPC coming into 22 with that engineering design study, which popped that number up. But otherwise, overall, there's no question, there's been some money that we didn't get to with COVID, was the very low year, and it's been there, it's kind of rolled forward in 2021, and now hopefully we've got the plan here for 22 to have some significant dollars in infrastructure coming. And then the next page, it just shows the dollars amount per year for as well.
Is this, oh, sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
on 64, I'm assuming these are actuals and then futures are budgeted? Or are these,
So say that one more time.
on page 64?
Yes,
I'm assuming, because I don't think this is what we budgeted each of those years. These are
it's the
actuals?
actual, yeah, those are audited numbers through 20, then 21 is based on our amendments,
Right, okay,
and then 22, 23, 24 are the budget.
okay, because I think there's some, and I think this is an example of,
Yep.
we were probably pretty close to even, but things got pushed year after year and then COVID hit. And, yeah, okay, that makes sense.
That's exactly right. Okay, that CIP, if we turn then to page 66, this was just, it's a real rough loan schedule, but I just wanted to tell you that we are, going to go forward with, the 5-year loan schedule for Captain's Table. Eric had reached out to Captain's Table, and 5 years seemed like the feasible one, with the 0% interest and the payback. And like I said, Margaret's gonna be preparing the actual document to come before you, but we can get that $30,000, going here yet this year if possible. And then we had been asked about the impact if we were to remove the capital out of the parks budget, what that would be. And so, let me see, which one is quick. Actually, skip to page 69. 68 is just an update of moving the 400,000 of property taxes directly into the parks fund, instead of a transfer from the general fund. That was 68. But on 69, if you start on the first page, for the years 15, 16, 17, and 18, it's not a clear picture because I think it might have been in year 17, maybe it was 18, when the numbers popped up a little bit. That's when the city, it appears we had some insurance money on the captain's table that we sat on, and we didn't get the actual captain's table constructed. And those were, at the time, included in operating numbers. And so it's looking like there's some excess reserves aside from capital, and that's really not the case. We need to look at 2019 now, and you'll see that revenues over expenditures will clear down to 29,000. And if you flip the page in 20, the numbers did go up to 193,000 revenues over expenditures, because with COVID, we kind of shut down, which is the way the world was. But then as we head into 21, 22, 23, and 24, you'll see that even with the additional property taxes, the additional levy, and the savings that we have from the pension obligation bond, there continues to be a draw-in of expenditures higher than revenues. So as we head into the 2024 year final, we need to get a plan together over the next 3 years. Again, we do have cash reserves, and they are very grateful for the property taxes and the seasonal help and the increased capital and all of it. But I'm just saying on an ongoing basis, we're going to continue to have to work on both parks and library. And then you'll see down below, it's the capital dollars, and significant dollars, it's that bottom row there in the 22-23 year with the construction of the pool and other capital projects that the park is doing. Any questions on that? If we move forward into the library, I did work with Brian, and we did incorporate money with overtime. We tweaked it ever so slight from the printout that was in the original document. And so we've got Sunday hours back in force on January 1 of 22 with all the benefits that correspond with that overtime. And their estimated ending fund balance at 2024 is 5.85% and still in that $200,000 range. Again, you can kind of see the fund balance is trickling down. So again, we're going to have to put our heads together, come up with a little more permanent plan to stay with. In addition, and then Brian wrote up a nice little email to me on those changes in the dollars. I just attached that. And then Brian also did provide the endowment accounts. And I have the actual most recently quarterly statements for the Moline Foundation. They also have an endowment for Carol Brundage, I think I'm saying that right, and then for a Hilton Mark fund. And so you can see between all those funds, and this is for the quarter ending September 30th on each one of them. $782,000 ending fund balance in the Moline Foundation, a little over 100 in both of the other two funds. And again, these are endowments, and Brian was kind enough, he did make some bullets on how those funds are to use, because if some of the endowments, there was parameters that they do have to follow going forward. And so he was kind enough to jot some of those in.
Hang on, Mr. Wen, I'll call you in a second. So the issues we have going forward with funding the library are not mitigated by any of these, any of what they draw, 4.25% on the endowments at all. Or do you see what I'm asking?
It's the interest is those endowments.
Right, but is that, that still doesn't get us to better funds?
No.
Okay, got it. Just wanted to double check. Mr. Wen.
Yeah, at one point, we were told that one of the funds was the excess money donated at the time of construction, and it was excess that they didn't need when they built the, whatever, it's $12 million library. And so that it was somehow earmarked for future construction or other construction-related activities. Is that the 700 and?
It would be the larger fund, and I really have to have Brian speak to that. I know that out of this fund, that foundation, they did make arrangements, that's part of what helped pay for that property, the extra property, and it drew that fund out to that.
So that may also be a place where they're doing that children's garden and,
Yes, I think that's what they're still working on their strategic
Okay.
plan, but I believe those types of funds would come out of this.
I think that's important because if we're talking about other big ticket items, if we know that there's a funding source for that, then that might help us in our discussions. Okay.
Any other questions on that? And then the next item, I'm gonna keep moving here, this is just, a scenario, it's an option. As the budget was originally prepared, was to continue on with the RANs for water and WPC, helping to support, TIP 7 through those RANs. And then the question came up because of the cash flows in water and WPC, what if we were to pull these out and have the general fund pay for these RANs to give the money back to the water and WPC now? We did that as a scenario, and I'm gonna show you the impact, it's the very next category here with the impact on the cash flows. But, you can see on the page here, the first one I think was the one I gave you, shows, highlighted in yellow, all of those monies going back here in 22 is when we would actually consider maybe reversing those RANs. And that's for council's decision whether they wanna do that. And then the drawdown, it's about $1.8 million between the two funds. $802,000 for water, $995,000 for WPC. It certainly does help their cash flows, but it would be a drawdown of those $6.7 million of reserves in the general fund. And then I'll show you that the impact as far as the percentage of fund balance to expenditure percentage in the fund. And then the advances, you can see as well, of course, they will pop up to the general fund if indeed we make those transfers. For 22, it would go back up to $10,428,000. So it's about that $1.8 million higher. But we're still in, I think it's about between 32 and 34% in the general fund. So I'm going to show you how that plays out. So you'll have to let me know what council decides on that. Then we're going to move right into the water fund. Again, this is just an updated 5-year.
Not even your watch can hear you,
Even your watch can't hear you. Isn't that a statement?
Really crazy. I've never had that happen. A text person, I'm gonna take it off. It's like, that's crazy. I've never had that happen. Okay, so sorry. That's wild. Okay, if we're talking about the water fund, let's turn to page 80. And we did have a couple of questions about the water fund. But the first one I wanna make a notation here on page 80. You'll see in the year 22, the proceeds from interfund accounts. That is where, this is just a scenario, so I can show you what the impact is. If we were to reverse those RANs out, do an advance from the general fund instead, $802,000 coming into water brings that ending fund balance out in year 2026 up to $4.3 million and 64,000. In addition, Tony wrote a memo of the changes that were occurring in salaries. We are now no longer doing chargebacks the way they did them for years, and we're actually doing splits with every person. If you are split with various departments, the payroll automatically calculates that, so there's not the double. Remember, we had all the transfers and it was doubling up the budget. And then in addition, we're also doing that on the expenditure side. So if you've got a bill come through, and if it's split between, water and WPC or stormwater, we split it at the time that we pay it. We don't wait till the end of the quarter or the end of the year and do a change. But that was part of the changes overall. In addition, I had not taken our 8.5% vacancy amount away from water and WPC. And so when I did that, that was several hundred thousand. It was like 215 plus in each fund, WPC as well. And, water is 20% vacant right now and 16% in WPC. So it could even be higher than 8.5%. Just depending on how quickly we can count through, trying to get people recruited. But anyways, if you look at the cash flow now, those numbers are all leveled out. Tony's done an in-depth review of it as well, and I have looked at it. But if we were to do the reversal of the RANs, it makes, the water and WPC, you'll see in a minute, look much better than the cash flows you saw on Saturday. Yes?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I feel like we're with this change and what you found, now we're on the other end of the spectrum of it's probably too cash rich. I mean, because this, in the fact of, it's in every year exceeding our policy for reserves by quite a bit. I understand where we're at and why you're doing this, but from the story we had heard before, like, hey, we're going to need to rate increases, to now it looks like we're more than flush with it. There's always projects to do, but
it did make a big difference when you put in, 800,000, and if you take away those, the full funding of all the positions down to what maybe is actual staffing level. The other thing, of course, as we talked about before, even under the scenario with the 800,000, if you look at 23, 22 and 23, we're at that 38, 37%, which that's not terribly high when we've got some projects going, but it's the big drop off of our debt that we talked about, and that is what's really nice, if we're able to pay cash for larger amounts of projects, and maybe deferring having to do bonding in the future for some of those. But no, this paints a very nice picture.
Well, and I hear what you're saying. I really like not raising rates on residents for an essential like this. So whatever we can do to find that sweet spot of balancing out the reserve policy with what we've got. Mr. Wynn.
yeah, it may be something where rather than, because I was feeling like, hey, we need to maybe pay these RANs right now because we're going to wind up in the hole. Maybe we pay those RANs off over time, and maybe we could use some of that excess reserve, a little bit of it each year to pay this back and give us some flexibility, because if we're going to be possibly using it for other projects in the near future, I think that'd be a better place to spend it than.
And this is just an option. I wanted to show because it is a big ask.
So, are you interested in direction now or later, or the council needs more time to think?
I think I'll wait until we go through the impact on the general fund.
Okay.
And then yes, if we could have action, just to know which way you'd like us to put the budget together.
Okay.
And then the next one, if you turn to page 84, it's the impact on, it's actually on 85. The impact of the 995,000 you see highlighted in yellow for that ran in WPC. And again, this helps restore those fund balances as well. We're down to about 54% in 26. But you can see that there does continue to be a draw down. But we've also got some pretty substantial projects, and we've also got that south slope issue to be addressing as well. So that is in a little bit of a different category with future rate studies. But this does help restore WPC, there's no question. Any questions on that? And then moving forward on the stormwater, I just wanted you to see the impact when we took out the it was the ARP funding for that, is it 36th Avenue Court? It obviously helped that cash flow with it. There's not a lot of cash in that fund. We're talking in the 200,000, and there's only 98,000 in 23, and then it creeps back up to the 300 or 400. There's not a lot of money, and that's something that we're going to, as you gave direction the other day, look at the rate study with ongoing projects needed. And then in sanitation, this is the one that we're going to continue to look at. we've had the two options of no fee increase and the 2%, and staff will be coming back, looking at the types of things that you guys were talking about, like the two types of charges for the parks. If we brought on some of the 6 and over rental units as part of the fee as well. So we're gonna take a look at that and come back to you prior to the budget or sooner, for next year. But with the cash advance, it's going to be a loan from the general fund. It does have cash flow projected through 2026. It is declining, but there is cash flow available. And then,
And that was a loan, right?
yes, it's going to be a loan. We set it up as an advance. And then I think one of the last items here is just a copy of the tree bank. Let me see where it's at. Need to flip and see. Yeah, the last couple of items here is just the tree bank, and then we talked about having staff come back with an ordinance on the tree bank, and then incorporate the sidewalks as well. So the handout on the tree bank is the same one you had on Saturday, and then Daryl and Joe, they did prepare the outstanding balance from the sidewalk program. And we anticipate the variance money right now to be about $46,500. And then that money will go right back into the program. That's on page 95. And with all of these changes built in, this is the new pie chart with revenues and expenditures. It actually decreased the overall budget by a couple of $100,000. But this also does show the $1 million transfer to the pool, and that's all played in with all the different ups and downs. So now what I'd like you to do is to go back to page number 14 at the beginning, and I'll show you the impact if we did the drawdown on the pool for $1 million, and if we reversed the land to the water and WPC. The new net fund balance at the end of 22 would still be at 34.95%, and you'd have $42 million of excess still remaining, even making those transfers.
Page 14.
Page 14, internal equities. Looking down on the general fund.
Could you repeat that for me again, Carol?
Okay, on page 14, even if we make the transfer from from the general fund to pay for the pool for the $1 million, and then if we reverse the rands currently paid by water and WPC to TIF 7 and take it as an advance out of the general fund, along with all the other changes that we had, because we reduced the transfers, the 400,000, because the property taxes went into parks. We originally had the sanitation in there for 500,000 as a transfer in, not a loan, so we reversed that back out. So the net impact of all those changes is we still have almost 35% fund balance to expenditures with net reserves. I always hate to use the word excess. It's available reserves for other projects of $4.2 million. And that is doing all of those things.
If I remember correctly, the fund balance to expenditure in days, what we saw Saturday was 140 something.
Yeah.
So we're going down to 126.
Good.
Yes,
Okay.
and the percentage was 41.15, going
Mr.
down to 35.
Mr. Went.
I appreciate you, and I think that this shows kind of how healthy we are and what's going on with that. I think I would like us to hold off on making these decisions until we have our prioritization discussion next week, because I think we've found out that WPC and water are actually healthier than what we originally thought when we were concerned last weekend. And so I wouldn't be in favor of moving those right now, because I think that there are other more imminent projects and things that we could use and be more flexible with this. The sanitation, I think we're pretty close to getting thin, so I would probably support that. And then I think the discussion on the pool will be part of that, on whether it's the sweet spot is $1 million or $2 million or whatever that is. And so I think this is a good representation, but I think that it should probably be, the decision should be made after we have that conversation next week.
Williams, is that a hand, Mr. Williams?
No.
No, okay. I did have a question about the recycling numbers.
Yes.
I think I had made the mention of expanding, the pool or the people using it. I am conscious, though, of the fact that that cost would probably be passed on to the renters. So I'm wondering if staff can find out if there's any way we can offset that in any way. I know KJ has very specific rules she has to follow with rental assistance and things like that, but I just put it out there as a question mark I have in my head. I still think it's the right thing to do for the environment. It could be a good move, but I would want to know if there were supports available before moving in that direction. Mr.
Are you
Williams?
talking about page 93 in Keith's information?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a couple questions about that. One thing, while the mayor was looking for page 93, one thing that Rickema is talking about countywide is that there's two underserved folks for those drop-offs. The rural folks and the people in multiplexes. That seems to be the two areas that we need to take a look at. The rural folks is tougher actually than these multiplexes. So there's been discussion, at least with some of the cities, and Silvis was gonna actually talk about it, of maybe putting recycling dumpsters at these plexes, in our case, 6 and above. And I see the totals there, so that's nice to see the totals there, Mayor, for those. So obviously, those costs, something I want you to think about, not asking for any direction yet. But a couple things to keep in mind. You can certainly put dumpsters, recycling dumpsters at these plexes. Then how does it get charged? We wouldn't want to take that ourselves. Is you gonna put that on the property owner, or are you gonna put it on the renters? Obviously, you want to put it onto the property owner. It's almost impossible to collect from the renters when they come and go. So you're gonna have a little pushback there if you put it onto the property owners. And the other thing to keep in mind, or at least I would tell you, is you manage your recycling yourself in your house, and you do a pretty good job of not sliming it, so to speak. In multiplexes, the history is not that. Somebody's moving out and they don't have that dumpster where you throw your solid waste is full. Well, there's another one. So keep that in mind when these discussions come. It's a lot easier said to recycle when you're managing it, taking care of it yourself, than just throwing a dumpster out there. And so, and that's one of the problems we have at drop-off. That's what's going on at drop-off. They get down there, it looks like it's full. No, what the heck, just throw it anywhere. So, but that is under discussion to see how we could do that. I think I mentioned to a few people, there is a couple of cities, Iowa City is an example, that has an ordinance that says that multiplexes are required to put a recycling dumpster there, and that the city is just out of it completely. They don't charge for it, and that's on to the multiplexes. I don't know if we want to go that route, but at least that's a consideration to keep in your mind. Thank you, Your Honor.
And I do want to mention that I did send an email out trying to convene another working group. I've mentioned the working group on shelter and security, homelessness, et cetera. I'm trying to convene a working group around environmental issues, especially the things we've been bringing up in the last couple meetings. So I would hope there's good coordination between many heads around these issues. So I just think I want to move carefully on this piece, this page 93. And I'm not sure what that means for the final budget, but I don't want to move too fast on it either. So, Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying about the concern about this being passed on, but in the real world, it's not elastic like that. It's not something like, okay, well, it's gonna cost me an extra $6 a month, so I'm gonna charge this person an extra $6, like in a 6-plex or an 8-plex or whatever. The property owner is going to wind up eating it. They're going to wrap it up in the cost of their rent over time and increases and those sorts of things, because landlord is going to try to maximize their rent unless they're a good tenant, and then they're just going to make sure that they don't move over. So I understand what you're saying. You're probably going to get pushback from sixplex and sevenplex owners, not because if it was really easy just to pass it on, then you wouldn't get much pushback. You're gonna get pushback because they're gonna eat the cost of it, at least until they can eventually rent the place out for a little bit more down the road. And they're going to then, as Alderman Waldron said, they're gonna have to deal with the stuff that doesn't get into whatever it is and the carts that are around or whatever. That being said, I'm in favor of this, and it's gonna be a burden on the sixplex that I've got, but I think it's probably the right thing to do, but.
And well, that just proves the point of needing to see if there are other supports that we can have in place, other programs that either subsidize it for one of the two entities or help with it when needed, or if we want to see this happen, we just have to explore the ways we can have it happen.
I think you're subsidizing the landlord at that point, which is fine. I mean, if that's what you,
It's
I'm not advocating.
it's an argument for another day. I just point out that we need to proceed carefully and cautiously. Yes.
Last time, and I forgot to bring it up when I had the floor. Rickham is also looking at doing an RFP right now, is when staff gets time, by-state staff gets time, about bringing back drop-off, but it is a private venture. Someone like, as an example, Republic Services would take it on, would maintain it. Cities, townships, wherever may provide a site, but it would be out of the hands of our staff. Now, is it still gonna look ugly in our city? Potentially, yes, if they don't get there and service it. But that would be on them. RICMA and Bi-State is doing a RFP now to see if there's any interest. There's a new provider in the area, if you haven't heard of them, they're called Lakeshore, and they are a competitor. The only problem with them is that they take their trash, so to speak, to Henry County, the Atkinson landfill. And so that not necessarily doesn't help us. Because it's not, then the stuff isn't going to our landfill. But there are other options out there. We are proceeding on to look at those through Rickman.
Have you been able to talk to them about the money we agreed to allot?
Yes, I informed them. I didn't tell them the amount that we set aside. I did tell them that Moline was willing to partner with somebody, anybody. We didn't want to be the only site in Rock Island County. And at this point, we haven't had anybody step forward. The committee really thinks, now the committee is more generated right now towards the rural areas. And they are trying to see if one of the townships, if a lot of these, if this is a rural issue, why don't these townships step up? They're all out in the rural areas, that's the form of government out there. Why don't they step up and provide a site? I don't know how optimistic we are, but we're still looking for partners. Rock Island appears to be the only one that shows some interest at this point.
Okay. Mr. Timian.
Just while we're on the topic, I know that Midland Davis is not far from our drop-off site, and they take donations during the day, during business hours. Paper, plastic, glass. I think plastic and glass is new. Is it possible just to put a sign up for now that says, hey, it's 2 blocks away, drop it off?
Yeah, I don't know if, I haven't talked to Midland personally. I know that would be for Joe or staff to do.
Take the Scott?
Pardon?
So don't they, with a lot of that stuff, they have to then
It all
transport
goes to Scott County. Every bit of recycling in this county, from Midland, from our drop-offs, from Republic, all goes to
Yeah.
Scott County.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Mr. Vitas can research that.
Well, yeah, and I can give you a contact at Midland about
Okay.
that too.
Thank you.
Do you need further direction at this point on a particular items?
No, I don't think so. I couldn't find my calendar. Somebody has it handy.
Budget calendar.
Right
If
here.
we could potentially, just to stay on track with our calendar, as we head into this November 2nd, again, we had talked about potentially having a third work session, and then we would be looking at a publication date as well for the budget public hearing notice. So if we can possibly land next week, then after our discussions on some priorities, I think we'll be set to stay on track and get the budget adopted here by December the 7th.
Okay. Thank you so much, girl. We appreciate all of your quick work. This is an amazing amount of material. I don't know how you did it. You and all the staff that had to contribute, so please express our thanks to the staff for their
I
quick
do
work.
all the time. Thank you.
Okay, any further public comment in this committee of the whole? Hearing none, I'll close out that meeting and,
Your Honor, there'll be no invitation.
okay, call to order city council meeting. Pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Alderman Williams,
Present.
Macias,
Present.
Went,
Present.
Timian,
Present.
Moyer,
Present.
O'Brien,
Present.
Waldron,
Present.
Schmidt.
Present.
Your Honor, I request approval of committee of the whole council and executive session minutes of October 26, 2021. Resolutions. Council Bill 1206-2021, a resolution authorizing the mayor and city clerk to execute and attest to an intergovernmental agreement with the village of Moline for provision of water and sanitary sewer service to certain properties situated in the proximity to the municipal border. Council Bill 1207-2021, a resolution authorizing approval of change order number 1 and final with McClintock Trucking and Excavating Incorporated for project number 1341, 2020 Stormwater Project for the amount of $10,185.88.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman O'Brien.
Just
Yes.
one clarification on that. I had given an update on change to the minutes to Janine, and she added that was just on the motion on the water rate review by staff for out-of-city residents, either that could be annexed or that are in other jurisdictions.
Thank you.
About that,
So I
yes,
should have
thank you.
said the minutes as amended. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Alderman O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Timian,
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays. And that motion passes. Non-consent agenda, first reading ordinances. Council Bill 3029-2021, an ordinance amending Chapter 35 zoning and land development of the Moline Code of Ordinances by enacting an amendment to the zoning map incorporated therein as Section 35-3103, Mad Productions LLC, 2215 37th Street and 3640 22nd Avenue.
Move to consider.
Second.
All right, motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Schmidt. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Timian,
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays. And do we have a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Thank you.
Second.
All right, motion by Alderman Went, seconded by Alderman Schmidt. Discussion? All right, hearing none, roll call, please.
Alderman O'Brien,
Aye.
Waldron,
Aye.
Schmidt,
Aye.
Williams,
Aye.
Macias.
Aye.
Went,
Aye.
Timian,
Aye.
Moyer.
Aye.
8 ayes, no nays. And that motion passes. Council Bill 3030-2021, an ordinance amending Chapter 27 purchasing of the Moline Code of Ordinances, Section 27-4103, legal requirements by adding procedural amendments to conform with requirements cited in the recent HUD audit. And that is all I have this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Williams, miscellaneous business.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Macias,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Went,
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Timian.
Thank you, Your Honor. I had the pleasure of watching the sidewalk replacement crew today replace the sidewalk in front of my house. And beside my house, I put in the request last year, and I'm just thrilled that it is here before the winter, where there was formerly a large ice pond all winter long. So I just wanted to show my appreciation for this program and thank everyone at the city for being a part of that. Thank you.
Mr. Moyer.
Nothing this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Mr. Schmidt.
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay, I just have one update for you. Today I attended the transportation group, Metropolitan Transportation Group for committee for Bi-State. I was very pleased, thank you to staff, that we have applied for funds from them and we were awarded several of those. The one that is sticking for money for several projects. One that is sticking out to me is the phase 1 of the Morgan Park sidewalks. And I knew that if I told y'all that, people would be excited. And I recall that coming through in the public meetings, listening posts, gathering information for strategic planning and all of that. So it was really nice to see that alignment and noted absence of other cities applying, putting projects forward. So I feel badly that they were not on the list, but Moline did prevail in several ways with their technical committee, so that's a good thing for us. That's all I have. Anything from you?
Just a reminder that December 1st is the ceremony for the bridge. That has not changed, and it's still on track, so keep it on your calendar. You'll all be receiving an invitation, and we are in the process of compiling a list of all of the former officials who were engaged in the planning and ultimate construction of that bridge. So we're compiling that list that'll be going out on Friday,
Bob, I'm sorry, could you say what that date is again?
December the 1st.
Thank you.
And it remains unchanged.
A time, possibly, or?
No.
Those details have not been released at this point. Just keep the day open because there's a morning and an afternoon event involved, and you can escape midday if you'd like. If you don't get blown off the bridge by the wind.
Bob, just trying to give you some help. Bi-State is having their 55th annual lunch tomorrow, celebrating their 55th year. And one of the things that they did was compile a list of all the people that worked on the bridge so they could invite them to their lunch.
Yeah.
So if you talk to Denise, she may already have a list of the Moline representatives that she invited.
Yeah. Thank
For
you,
the bridge.
Alderman Waldron. I did get a list from Denise today,
Okay.
and it was pretty exhaustive. So I'm working with Macy to ensure that we don't miss anybody, because there are certain key staff members who probably should receive an invitation who are here during the critical stages. Construction is one thing; getting it to fruition is really the critical stage.
Correct.
You can build anything, but
And
to
the-
get it there is harder.
The update at the committee meeting I mentioned was that they're really working on opening the bike paths and then the December one. So that was all.
We'll see about that. It's the landscaping I can't wait to see next year.
Okay, yes.
Thank you for bringing that up. So one of the things we're gonna be talking about hopefully next week is the state skate park, pump track, and those sorts of things. What I'd like to do, and I don't know with the landscaping and anything, what I'd like to do is direct staff, because I think there seems to be some consensus that we want to do something under the bridge, that we direct staff to communicate to the powers that be that we plan to do something down there and to like keep the fences away or whatever we can, or to work with us so that we can actually utilize underneath there. So I'd like to direct staff that.
I'd like to comment on that before we
Yeah.
direct anyone,
Yeah,
please.
hang on.
What was that?
I would like to comment on that
Oh.
before going forward, because there was a lot of discussion about that over the last couple of weeks. And as it stands today, the landscaping contracts were let based upon what the council agreed 2 years ago, several years ago. So the fences themselves are actually going in on both sides of the river as we speak. And these are basically chain link fences, are 4 feet high, and it's just basically galvanized aluminum is really what it is. Those fences are going in, and that's because of federal requirements as well as IDOT requirements. So they are putting those chain link fences in, and there's a plan where they go. The landscaping aspect of this project was also agreed to by the previous council several years ago.
I was gonna say, that was.
And that contract was let, and there was 2 options. The council at the time made a decision, and the decision was not to go with traditional landscaping. There was concerns about nothing growing under the bridge. So what you have is this, I can't even begin to describe it to you.
Moonscape?
Well, I call it a moonscape, thank you. It's where Venus meets Mars, and there's, Really, it does, that's what
Yeah.
it looks like, seriously. And it was just really too late to stop it or do anything about it, and why? The council had approved it, so we just let it go for right now. You know, going forward, if the council does get to a point where they move to put in some type of a pump track or some type of a skate park underneath that bridge, you will tear out ultimately, in some respects, what the DOT puts in. So it is a waste of money, there's no question, but I don't know how to stop it. That's one of the issues. And then you have to have a plan for the skate park, and you have to have a budget for it, and you have to have a funding source, and we're nowhere near answering any of those questions today. So there's no reason while that deliberation goes on, which may take years, that we don't allow them to finish the project and go back and retrofit the space with the bike pack, skate park.
Mr. Ward.
And those would be my thoughts, just knowing what I know today.
And I appreciate that, and I'm hoping that maybe our conversation next week might get us a step closer to prioritizing those. But we had been kind of told that same thing about the cul-de-sacs, that contract had been let, that they were, the train had gone. We kept pushing back, and we eventually got them removed and actually got a little parking lot because we ultimately saved them money in the process. And so I hear what you're saying. You can't fight, well, not City Hall, but IDOT. But I really think if with a concentrated effort that we can convince them not to waste money of things that we're just gonna wind up tearing out anyway. And if you feel more confident that we wait until next week where we have a plan of prioritization or funding or those sorts of things. But I guess from my standpoint, I'd like to tell them sooner than later and say, hey, this council that we have right now, not council from, must have been at least 10 years ago, because it was before I was.
2014.
Yeah, okay, because I got elected in 2015. That, that was then, that is not the vision of this council now, and that, I understand it's an uncomfortable and it's not, and they may just keep saying no, but that's what we were told about the cul-de-sacs, and we got rid of them. The cul-de-sacs.
There's 2 cul-de-sacs that were eliminated and a small parking area created, which will one day become a linear park connecting along the bridge.
So I wonder if we just wait on your, he knows that we all want to move forward with something there. We have this conversation next week, and then we can circle back. And I believe I heard some of this from Alex Elias as well in my bi-weekly meeting with her. And so it is a situation that needs attention, but maybe not directives. Okay. All right. Is there executive session this evening?
No.
No, there's
Oh,
not.
what? 8 o'clock?
I need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
That's a secret, just don't,
All right.
don't bring it, don't talk about it over under pontification.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are adjourned.